Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert and awarded RevTech strategist of 2024. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about, rather than failing fast that she doesn't like, learning fast. And we went on to talk about how you can make different seasons of life and the lessons you learn really stick. We talked about the unexpected and leaving room for learning. This was a kind of a circular discussion when we kept coming back to, those core personal values and how you can change the culture in an organization and really make it stick to be customer-centric, to speak the customer's language. You're going to love this conversation. My next guest is the marketing executive, strategist, and storyteller with deep expertise in go-to-market strategy. As VP of Marketing and Sales at Yale Payment, she blends creative vision with data-driven execution. She advises startups and serves on the board of iCloudB.org, a youth mentorship not-for-profit. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Deidre Hudson.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you for having me as a guest on your podcast. I'm very excited to be here today.
Well, I'm really excited to get into this first question because I really want you to elaborate on this one, Deidre. You've talked about different seasons of life and how lessons are learnt and carried forward from one stage to the next. So enlighten me.
Thank you. Yes, this is a favorite topic of mine. So I believe that as we go through different stages of life, whether it's personal, professional, or both, we learn certain things and we carry those things forward with us into the next stage. Now, we may learn something about how to communicate, or we may learn something about ourselves, but that's a lesson that as we take it with us into the next stage, it may change, or it'll change how we think about things, how we approach things. So for instance, I'll give you an example. I have always been a person that was just very direct. And sometimes that comes across well, and sometimes it doesn't come across that well. But I had this thing where I used to call it my 0 to 60. I would say everything or I would say nothing. And I didn't really know how to maintain that authenticity, but still redirect it in a way that was a bit more constructive. I realized that I thought that if I wasn't expressing exactly how I felt, that I was somehow being inauthentic and untrue to myself. So going into this phase of my life, what I've realized is that I can bring authenticity. I can bring, speak with my truth, but I just need to maybe change it in a certain way or maybe modify how I'm doing that. So it doesn't mean that I lose the passion or the truth or the authenticity behind what I'm saying, but I use that as the fuel and then I guide that in a more constructive way. So I call it my velvet knife.
It's interesting because I'm very direct as well, and it's difficult to. It's not difficult, you want to strike the balance and not be someone else and be, as you say, true to yourself and authentic. And the thing is, other people value you for the thing that other people may not. So it's that balance is really difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it is difficult. And that was that was like the key lesson that I learned was that if I don't say it exactly the way I feel it or the way it sounds in my head, that doesn't mean that I'm being any less authentic. It just means that I'm reframing or redirecting it to be more of a constructive expression than just kind of saying what's in my head, right? There's this thing about when you're communicating with people, do you want to speak or do you want to be heard?
Yeah.
Right. So that's how I started to adapt the way that I communicate, and I communicate more in a way to be heard as opposed to speak.
Yeah, that's a really interesting phrase. So one way that I've reframed and adapted is the whole point of communication is to influence and, as you
Right.
say, be heard. And so if you can moderate the way that you speak to somebody so that it have as much power and influence to get your message across and be heard, then why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it kind of seems really easy. If I want to influence the world, then, if I need, and so it's not about me, it's actually about presenting what I need to influence in a way that it can be heard by the other person. So
Right.
that's easy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Challenge accepted.
Right. And being a parent, that's really helped me to sharpen that approach and way of thinking, because I've heard people, they would say things like, well, you got to pick your battles. And I was like, why pick my battles? I'm a parent. I could say what needs to be said, but it's all connected,
Yeah, yeah.
about the influence, as you mentioned. So yeah.
And it's interesting you talk about parenthood. Isn't that a great training ground for work?
God. You will learn things there that you have never learned anywhere else. It's an
Yeah.
exercise in self-awareness, it's an exercise in restraint, it's an exercise in,
Reverse psychology,
yes. For sure.
negotiation skills,
Negotiation tactics for sure.
moderating your emotions
Oh
and
my
your
God.
tone. And
Yes, emotional regulation. Yes.
yeah.
All those things.
The whole remit. And then you go into the boardroom and it's a lot easier once you've
Right?
learned those skills. It's like my 5-year-old taught me this.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd like to ask you, how do you ensure that sales organizations, because we're talking about leadership and moderating your tone and your voice to be heard, but very much in a selling, marketing, and sales remit that you navigate daily. How do you align what you want to achieve with ultimate revenue growth and customer growth with the terms specifically with people, process, and technology? How do you align all of that across the divisions?
Yeah, and I think the key word there is alignment and a desire to be aligned, as opposed to what we were doing, 5 years ago, and still exist in some companies, where there is such blatant misalignment between the different functions. Everyone is talking a lot about go to market and holistic, and the bow tie as a framework. And it really is important. So the way that I align it from a people standpoint is I try to build cross-functional accountability, right? So marketing, sales, and product need to operate from a shared single source of truth, whether, that's shared dashboards, shared information. We need to have joint KPIs. What I did with one of my previous companies was that I made sure that, myself as a head of marketing and our head of sales and our head of product had at least one OKR in common, right? So that helps to create alignment between the functions, between our teams. And then also, with that, along those same lines of OKRs, is that we agree on what the KPRs are that we're driving. Ultimately, it is revenue, right? But everybody has they're kind of eating a different piece of the pie or baking a different piece of the pie and how they get there. But we need to be aligned on what those metrics are that we're after.
Yeah.
So it's not marketing coming into a meeting say, hey, I've generated 5,000 MQLs, but we only got 2 customers. Oh, that's misalignment, right? So from a process standpoint, because you mentioned people in process, from a process standpoint, I like to focus on simplicity and consistency. Some people look at process as a 4-letter word, but process is actually a key to growth because you're not reinventing the wheel every time. You have a way of getting things from point A to point B, and you're not trying to figure it out every time. So I like simplicity and I like consistency. There needs to be clear handoffs between different functions. There need to be well-defined pipeline stages or, customer journey stages, and it needs to be these just great feedback loops between sales and marketing and customer service and product to ensure that insights are flowing both ways. One of the things that I think is really important, and I don't know how well a lot of people do this, but when you look at what customer service is dealing with, they're talking to customers, right? They're talking to customers on a daily basis, and they have insights that we as marketing need to know, right? They need to filter back up to the top of the funnel so we can use that in our messaging. That needs to filter down to sales so they can use it in closing deals. So there has to be this really great feedback loop between those different groups. And then I think you mentioned like technology and systems also. So in terms of technology, we need to make sure that our systems are serving us, not the other way around. One of the things that I hate, hate with a capital H is when, I'm trying to get some data from a dashboard or from a system, and I'm told, well, we can't do that, or we can't look at it that way. Why the hell not? That's what it's there for, right? It's not just there to be a technology platform. It's there to provide the information that we need to make decisions. So I have a goal of leveraging automation and analytics tools so we can surface actionable insights, not just data, right? It's what can we use to move this forward, not what's nice to know. That has a place in exploratory analytics or something different. And we just need to make sure that those platforms are helping us to make better decisions.
Yeah, I love this, Deidre. You've clearly built a connected or aligned revenue engine where people, processes, and technology are all around aligned around the OKR or the purpose. At scale, the data-informed approach I use that's sales-specific predictive analytics. We uncover what are those gaps in the operation, whether it's the people, process, or technology, because often within organizations they don't see their own gaps because there isn't that alignment, there isn't the handoff that you talked about. There is still so many organizations that work in silo and not realizing how connected it is, and there's a lot of finger pointing and no one wants to take responsibility. So, for instance, identifying whether the gaps in revenue performance comes from the people capabilities or comes from the process friction or comes from the misalignment of the customer strategy or not having those feedback loops that go anywhere. No one does anything about it. So I'm really curious, when you're building that alignment that you talked about, by having the kind of joint goal and then having underneath that each of the divisions understand what are the KPIs that lead up to that overall goal. How do you diagnose where the real gap is between the people, the processes, and the customer strategies? What are the steps that you take first to identify and then to close those gaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love looking at it that way because it's everything really ties back. I mean, the strategies that you utilize for customer acquisition, you can use to diagnose your own internal gaps and misalignments as well. So what I really like to do is whatever process we're talking about or whatever it is we're trying to solve, I like to map out what are all the conversion points, what are all the opportunities, where are all the decision points happening so that we can see, are we optimizing that particular decision point for the best outcome? And if not, then that gives us an opportunity to say, okay, there's a problem here. So for instance, if we're finding that, when we're getting to sales, for instance, that when we're handing over leads maybe to sales, and then sales is talking to potential customers, and there's a disconnect between what the prospective customer is expecting versus what the salesperson is saying we can deliver, then that shows us, hey, maybe there's a gap in our marketing messaging. Maybe we're saying things in our brand awareness or performance marketing that is not really delivering on or communicating what we can deliver. Or if we're finding that, there's customers that are not being serviced from a customer experience perspective in a timely way, what's happening there? Is that information being communicated to them in a timely way? Is there a breakdown in that communication gap? Is there a misaligned expectation about who's supposed to do what? So I think if you look at it from that perspective of map out, again, that journey and look for all those points, basically where a decision has to be made, and then you can optimize. It's like when you're driving, right? When you're driving and you are looking ahead and you're anticipating where there's going to be a slowdown. I guarantee you there is always a slowdown at a point where someone has to make a decision. If the road is going straight, then they have an opportunity to continue going straight or go left or right. You're going to see some blockage there because now people have to think and make a decision. Which way do I want to go? If we apply that same thinking to diagnosing internal problems, diagnosing customer journeys, whatever it is, look for where a decision has to be made and make sure that you're equipping that decision to be the best outcome.
Yeah, I love that you've kind of started with really the decisions that the customer goes through to identify what are the blocks, because often organizations very much see it from their point of view, what works for them, not realizing they're the ones that are creating a lot of the blocks in the system for the customer, and they're not making it easier. It isn't user friendly. They're not directing the customer where they need to go. They're not providing the information or anticipating the information that they need, or recognizing that information is sent out to other customers at this point, so it should be ready to go, or they don't need to ask for it. It's actually part of the pack. All of that.
Right.
You're absolutely right. It's a great way to look at the whole revenue operation, not from the revenue point of view, but actually from the customer's point of view. So I love that you've said that.
Yeah, absolutely. It always has to be from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So, share a unique or unexpected strategy that you've successfully used to enable buyers to engage and purchase with ease.
Yes, and I'm going to share something that is going to sound so simple, but it really changed how we were marketing at the time. So when you're developing content and you are developing messaging, you really have to speak in the language of the buyer. And this goes back to what I said earlier about are you speaking just to speak, or are you speaking to be heard? So using the language of the buyer, a company that I worked with in the past, we were doing basically short-term financing for Amazon sellers.
Mhm.
And we referred to them as sellers, but what they referred to themselves as were founders. We did some market research and we used different tools and, you know, excuse me, we looked at social media accounts and they referred to themselves as founders. So when you're speaking in the language of your customer, it creates that relationship and it creates that bond and it creates that sense from the customer's perspective that you really know who they are and that you really understand them. Like I said, it sounds very simple, but that is like, I think one of the most overlooked things. And I think sometimes the bigger the company gets, the more they turn to do inside out speak as opposed to outside in speak, right? Because everyone starts to get acclimated and used to the same language and they're saying things and then the buyers have no freaking idea what they're talking about. So
There is so much jargon in revenue, in sales, in marketing. Oh my gosh, we're so stuck on the revenue. It's the jargon. I mean, I know it, and sometimes I sit in meetings and it's like, really, do you know? And Like, please just keep it really simple. And it's not
Yes,
like I don't explain it. It's like, who speaks like that?
yes, yes. Keep it simple. Yes, please.
And as you started by saying, look, it seems so simple, but it's a mistake that so many organizations make again and again and
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
And I think language is so important. I've kind of spoken on the podcast before about the language we use, particularly in sales, and we talk about even our language we use in terms of hunters. I mean, really, you're a hunter. I mean, are we on safari? That what is the customer then if you're the hunter? I mean, it's kind of really a bit disrespectful internally and externally. We talk of targets,
yeah,
whether and aren't they people? Don't they have
yes,
a name? All of
yes,
this language that we use as a matter of course. And the thing is, because we're so used to it internally, we embody that in our thinking, and sometimes it slips out externally as well, and it's total disrespect internally and externally. And I'd really like to see us clean up the language, because it does infect our thinking about not being customer centric and not being human, but actually looking at people as numbers. And it's really disrespectful. So I'd love to see a real cleanup of the language within our industry.
so would I. I mean, I totally agree with you on that. And Drift was a favorite company of mine and lots of others for that reason of they started to coin the term treat people like people, not leads,
Mm.
right? And I think it does have an impact, because when you're doing QBRs or you're doing reviews or whatever, and you're just referring to people as like targets, or the other unhumane, or terms that we utilize, it creates this disconnect, and it does affect the way I think you see and treat them. And it's just, I would love to see that change too. You're absolutely right. Language is so important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's start that campaign.
Yes. You and I are going to
Yeah,
start.
exactly, exactly. That would be wonderful. So, what advice would you give a CEO or revenue leader, CRO, creating a roadmap for revenue success going into 2026, 2027? I mean, recognize so much is changing. So, what advice would you give?
I think the biggest thing is to leave room for the unexpected, um, and to allow room for training and for learning. I think that's something that is lacking a lot of the times, and it affects, going back to what you said about language, it affects how we treat experimentation, right? If you are with or working within a company or your budget, whatever, and you have no room for testing, then you're not allowing room for learning. There's a term, fail fast, which I don't like. I don't think it's about failing fast. I think it's more about learning fast. um, you need to have room to have those experimentations and for testing and learning. And then that goes back to what we started the conversation talking about how you take those lessons and you bring them with you into the next phase and next season. But if you don't have an appetite for that, then I think you're leaving a lot of potential on the table. I used to allocate a portion of my budget just for testing. And I said, this money, we're not going to evaluate it in terms of how many leads did it generate or whatever. We're evaluating, this is just for testing, and we're looking to learn. And then we're looking to see what insights and knowledge we can take and use that to actually affect results. But I think if you don't have that sort of appetite, then you're leaving a lot of potential growth on the table.
It's interesting what you say, particularly in this environment where there is so much moving fast, and the unknown unknowns, not to actually have a proportion of your time within the cultural structures for experimentation. The challenge is on the other side, you have the funders, the stakeholders, that are looking for a return on investment. And you would think that in a challenging environment, there would be much more flexibility than there seems to be in the system. So it's getting harder, I would imagine, for leaders to create that space to allow for the experimentation that you've talked about. So how is it a cultural thing? Is it a leader? Is it coming from top leadership? Where does that spark come from?
I think it's got to come from both. If your leadership, because your leadership is going to set the tone for the culture, right? And if your leadership doesn't have that, then you can, it's up to you to try to educate them about that. You know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I think in marketing in particular, we have attributed the hell out of our marketing budgets. And it's like, oh, they're looking for dollar for dollar investment attribution. Or if we can't attribute, results to that, then it's a wasted spend. And that's not necessarily the case. In marketing, we know that the marketing landscape has gotten noisier. Customers are more sophisticated. It's increasingly difficult to be able to attribute a dollar spend to a customer, right? It's more like a rising tide lifts all boats approach. But again, if some leadership doesn't, have that in their thinking or how they go about doing things, you can teach some people to do that and some people you can't. Some people are just going to be like, listen, if I can't measure it or attribute it, then it's a wasted spend. And then that's a different conversation. But yeah, we've attributed the hell out of our marketing budgets, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't survive in the way the world is today. So
yeah, I love that. I think that this is a good rounding to the whole discussion because a lot seems to be connected in what we're talking about, Deidre.
yeah.
What's the one personal value or belief that has shaped your approach to leadership and professional success?
I had the opportunity when I was just starting in my career to work with a person that was the embodiment of servant leadership. Before that was a term. And I've always strived to be that type of leader. I strive to be the type of leader that is empowering and helpful and authentic. Because I believe in authenticity, and that this goes back to what we talked about earlier. And I believe in empowering people. We spend more time with people we work with than our loved ones usually, and it's good if we can have authenticity, and I can be a servant leader as opposed to like a micromanager or a dictator. If I can help you get your job done, that helps all of us. So, that's really the personal value and belief that that has guided me a lot throughout my career.
So where did that come from? Is it your parents? Was it, a particular leader that you worked with? Where did you see those elements and you think, actually, that's I can recognize myself in that?
Yeah, so it started for me. I am truly going to date myself here, but it started for me. I was working at a human rights organization, and I worked with Lee Weiner. Lee Weiner was very active in the 60s in social protest and part of the Chicago 8 demonstration on the Democratic National Convention or Republican National Convention, I forgot which one, but in the 60s in Chicago. And I worked with him for 10 years. And what I learned sitting at the foot of, this great person was this idea of servant leadership. It's also where I fell in love with marketing from a data perspective. So I never forgot those lessons, and I tried to carry them with me throughout my career.
I love that. What a great story. You had that one hiding in there, Deidre. Absolutely love it. Deidre, how can listeners get hold of you?
LinkedIn, probably like everybody else. I'm on LinkedIn. My email inbox is the place where emails go to die. So I wouldn't even give out my email address because I probably wouldn't see a message anyway, but LinkedIn is the best place.
Right, lovely. Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience and giving us some wonderful stories, not only of as your daughter, but also, a real kind of master in servant leadership. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, Deidre Hudson.
Thank you so much, Janice. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me today.
If you enjoy this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, explore other episodes of insightful guest conversations or watch the caption show on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with strategies to help you scale your sales. I love to hear your thoughts, so please share your views and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more revenue generators just like you. So until next time, keep scaling your sales.